Hey everyone, it is Colt, and welcome back. This is day 3 of Colt's Coding Camp. I don't know about that name. It's too late, I guess, to change it, but I'm not sure. Anyway, today we are picking up where we left off. If you are starting with this video, you might want to go back and check out day 1. This is a sequential course. We're starting from the basics, and we're building upon what we've learned already. So today we're learning more HTML. We're almost done with the HTML portion of the course. Today we're talking about entity codes and tables in HTML and a bunch of associated elements. And as always, there will be a homework assignment at the end. And as always, I recommend that you do it. And if you're enjoying the course or you're getting anything out of it, or if you're a more advanced student but you know some people who are not, you know, some complete beginners, please consider sharing. Just post the day 1 video wherever it makes sense and wherever you feel comfortable. I know I will never share anything anybody asks me to share in a YouTube video, so I get where most of you are coming from, but if you have it within your heart to share this with other people, please consider doing so. Speaking of heart, I hope you're all doing well. Everyone's having an okay week given the circumstances, and I don't know why I said speaking of heart though. I guess I heart you. That was the connection. All right, and what else? Last announcement. If you make it to the end of the video, there is a lovely compilation of one of my cats getting stuck to a window screen dozens of times. So you can look forward to that. All right, here we go. Day 3, more HTML. So we'll begin with a quick recap of yesterday's homework. So I'm not going to write the entire solution from scratch. I don't want to waste your time here. So I've got it mostly written. Looks like this. I'm just going to add in a couple of pieces like the video, but most importantly, there was this line at the very top. I asked you to research entity codes and then put things like a copyright symbol in or an up arrow or a heart symbol. To do that, you needed to figure out what entity codes are. As this slide says, what the heck are they? Well, in HTML, there are certain characters that are reserved. They have a meaning in HTML, like less than or greater than. Those are characters that HTML uses, right, as part of the tag syntax. Quotes are attributes. So if I were to add in something like 1 is less than 4, this actually will work. Although you can see my formatting in here got totally screwed up. That's because VS Code is trying to parse the brackets and figure out where opening elements are and where closing elements are, and it thinks that we're inside of an element, this entire thing, because of that less than. So even if my browser is smart enough to anticipate what I meant to do, it still is not valid, and it's screwing up my indentation in VS Code. I'm going to get rid of that, and if I hit save again, it goes back to all being on the same level. That indentation doesn't matter, but it just shows you that what we're writing is not technically valid HTML. So that's where these entity codes come in. Entity codes are special codes. They're just pieces of text, but they all begin with an ampersand and they all end with a semicolon. And then in between, we have some crazy looking stuff like, for example, this one here, $X 2014, ampersand at the beginning, semicolon at the end, ampersand, semicolon. So we do have reserved character entity codes. If I wanted a less than bracket, I can do and LT for less than, and then semicolon. So if I go back and replace, instead of 1 less than 3, I could do 1 and then ampersand, LT, not in caps, semicolon. And if I save now, I don't get that weird indentation anymore, but it will still render as a less than bracket. All right, so that's one use case for entity codes to replace or to use in place of reserved characters. But we can also use these codes to type things that might be difficult to type on a typical keyboard. So things like a heart, a copyright symbol, whatever this is here. Is this a Greek? I don't know what that is. Different fractions. I'm looking at a different website that just lists all of the recognized HTML entity codes. There's quite a few of them. We're not going to worry about most of them. The things that we needed for the exercise were the copyright symbol. So you can see different ways of creating a copyright symbol. They'll all be the same symbol. I like to use the ones that are sort of English looking, where it says copy instead of X000A9. So I'm just going to copy that. It starts with an ampersand. It ends with a semicolon. And I'm going to replace this copyright symbol here with the copyright symbol, ampersand, copy, semicolon. I refresh. There it is. However, if you remember from yesterday, it was supposed to be superscript. So we'll put our sup around it, or sup. Refresh. Okay, now it's off that baseline. So we also have the up arrow and the heart symbol. We could just do a search on this website for heart. The other thing I would do, and I do this whenever I'm looking, is I'll just Google HTML entity heart. And then whatever first result I find, here we go. This is how you make a heart. There's a couple options it looks like. I'm just going to go with ampersand hearts semicolon. And that is supposed to go right here, heart symbol here. Paste that in, save, refresh our page, and there's our lovely heart. And then an up arrow. I would just do the same thing, HTML entity up arrow. And there we go, different website, but here's one way of making an up arrow. So we can use the Unicode version, the hex code, HTML code, the entity, which is what I prefer, where it has something remote, sort of Englishy, U-air for up arrow. So I'm going to copy that and go back, up arrow symbol here, paste that in. Make sure you always have that ampersand and that semicolon. They all start and end with those two things. And there we go. We've got our up arrow. And that's it for entity code. So I'm going to get rid of this here. We don't need to research that anymore. They are just special codes that you can include in your HTML in order to write characters that are either reserved, like less than, greater than, or quotation marks. But you can also use them to help you when you have some obnoxious or difficult to type character. They are not the same as emoji, but the good news is, unlike emoji, which differ from browser to browser and may not be supported, these entity codes are recognized across different browsers. So they're not as flashy or as fun, but they can be useful. Lastly, let's just add in this video element. So it's supposed to be a video here. The source is the video of my cat, which was called stuckkitty.mov, and it's not supposed to autoplay, but it should have controls, and it should be 500 pixels wide. Width equals 500px. I'll get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. And there she is, my little stuck kitty. She got stuck again after I published this video last night. And then we've got the same thing down here. Well, not the same thing, but we've got an image. And the source should be kitty under bed dot, what is it, JPEG. And then I said give it some alt text that's meaningful. So how about just my cat under the bed. And then a width of 500 as well. Width equals 500px. And let me get rid of this floating text that's not in an element. Refresh. And I think that's pretty much it. This was supposed to be italicized here. This was supposed to be a link. So I will update that in the final solution, but I won't make you watch that. I'll be right back with it. Okay, so I just updated this. It's now completed. We've got the italicized text. The link is in here for Animal Crossing. This is italicized. The video, the image, all that stuff is in here. So if you want to see a full solution, you can find it in the single download in the description of this video. Inside, you'll see a couple directories, one of which is yesterday's homework, and you can see the solution, index.html. Okay, so that is what the heck entity codes are. Now we're going to move on to talk about HTML tables. Such a fun topic. Now, when we say table, we're not referring to a wooden table, a piece of furniture. We're talking about a table, a text table or a data table, a tabular structure, right? You've got your columns, your rows, you've got information that you're displaying. So tables are relatively common on the web, not as much these days as they used to be, but that's because they used to be misused. In the past, tables would be used for laying out an entire application. So a table should be used to do something like this, right? A data table. You can style these, of course, and make them look way, way better. But in the past, tables were actually used to lay out an entire website. So here's the still functioning Space Jam website from, 1996. And if we look at it, I mean, it's obviously very dated. But if we actually open up the developer tools, which is something we haven't really talked a whole lot about. We will have some lessons or lectures on the developer tools. But if I use this Elements tab in Chrome and I open up a couple of these elements, you'll see that we have a table. Now this table is being used to hold content like images and text and links. That's not really what a table is supposed to be used for. A table should be used to store data and information that will be displayed in a tabular format. But anyway, if we look at it inside of our table, we've got things like, let's look at one of these elements here, an anchor tag. We've got images in there. This is just very, very janky, but this is how people used to lay out web pages in the 90s to early 2000s. It's just a misuse of tables, but at the time, it was pretty difficult to lay things out, to move things around on the page. These days, layout is definitely easier, although it's not easy. It's much easier than it used to be. So you should not use tables for anything like this. There are still tutorials and resources online that tell you how to use tables for layout. You should completely ignore those and never visit that website again if they recommend tables for layout. However, tables should definitely be used if you have tabular data. You have information that makes sense to display in a table. Anything like this here, this is on Wikipedia. It's not the most beautiful table ever, but it is a table. We've got different columns, different rows. There's lots of examples. Here's another one. This is still tabular data. It's a table illustrating the different Costco membership tiers. And here's a third example, just another table, sort of a price table. These are common or product feature tables. So you've got columns and rows, different little check marks. Obviously, this looks a lot nicer than the Wikipedia table or definitely the default table. But they're all basically the exact same thing behind the scenes. They're all created with the same HTML elements. Now, speaking of elements, there are quite a few elements that you can use when you're creating a table. I'll show you them here. Oh, look at that. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is it 9 elements I listed here? And this is not even a complete listing. You don't have to use all of these. This is a bigger topic we'll go into in a separate lecture around semantics and writing meaningful markup. So I'm going to start with the bare bones, the basics that you must have for a table, and then we can add on some of these other nice to have pieces. So the basic thing that we have to start with is the actual table element. The outer element, it's just table. And on its own, it's not going to do a whole lot for us. So I'm going to make a new file. I'll call this tables.html. I just right-clicked there on the nav bar or on the sidebar. And then I'll just do my little exclamation point tab, tables demo for my title. Don't worry about these meta tags. We have not discussed that. And then I'll make an H1 that just says tables. And then I'll make my first table. So it's a table element opening and closing. If I load that up in my browser, not much to look at. Nothing at all. We have to put content inside of our table. So there are multiple different elements that we can use. The most essential are TRs and TDs. A TR is a table row element. It establishes a row in a table, but it does not actually make individual cells of data. So if I add a single row to my table, a TR, we still won't see anything. I could add multiple rows, we won't see anything, because we have to populate a TR with TDs, which stand for, I don't know exactly. They're basically table cells, maybe table data cell. They're TDs. I don't know why they're not TCs. Who knows? But a TD is each individual cell. So this is a TD, that is a TD. This is another one, that's another one. This here is a table row, a TR. This is a TR, and so on. So we don't actually define columns vertically. We define our tables horizontally, each row at a time, which makes sense. It's usually how you're entering data into a spreadsheet. Anyway, let's try adding a TD or two in here. So I like to indent TD. What is our table even going to be? Well, let's just do some dummy data for now. I'll just do some colors, red, orange, do another one, yellow. We have 3 table cells, TDs in 1 TR. I'm going to refresh. Well, it's not that spectacular, is it? It is a table. Let's try adding in a second TR with some other elements in there. What would we display next to red, orange, and yellow? I don't know. Let's just put some numbers in there to start, some TDs. I'll work on getting something more important, or at least more useful, rather than just a table of colors. We refresh, and yeah, there's our table. It's not terribly exciting, but it is a table. Next, let's turn our attention towards a table that is a bit more complex and has more elements or more cells in it. It also has things like headers and actually has multiple headers here nested. Let's see how we could implement something like this. So we won't implement the entire thing. Maybe we'll just take a couple pieces. So the species name, the diameter, tree name. This is a table of the stoutest living single trunk trees by species. Very specific there. Some pretty cool trees, by the way. This one in particular, this baobab tree in South Africa, I think it is quite the tree. There's a bar that has been put in there, and I was having a great time researching it, looking at what a beautiful tree until I saw this. I guess it's now collapsed. Hopefully it's still alive. Anyway, it's a famous enough tree that it has its own TripAdvisor page. Now we're off track. Let's go back to the table. So what we could do to implement a table like this is just add a bunch of TRs, a table row with, let's just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individual cells, 5 columns. So I could start by making a row to store the headers of this table. So I could do TR, and then what do we have in there? Species. So I could do a TD for species. And then we have diameter in feet, diameter, feet. I'll just do FT. And then diameter, is it in meters? Yes, okay. So we could do this and then have our data as a separate TR down below. So for that first tree, it's a Montezuma cypress 1162381. All right. So we could add our TD in there, paste that in. Oh, I copied the wrong part, didn't I? We'll get that in just a moment. And then the diameter in 1162, and I can't keep the other numbers in my head, 38.1. Although I have these reversed on the table, meters came before feet. So this is a table, and this could work, and we could style that first row differently. So that you could see that it's headers. You could give it a background color like what they do here, but that is not really the right way of making a table. Instead, we have yet another element, a 2-letter element. It starts with a T, TH. I think it stands for header cell, table header cell. It works just like any of the other cells we've seen, or a TD rather, except we use TH. We don't really need to worry about this scope thing for now. And then we just have an internal value inside. So instead of making these TDs, they're actually headers, right? They're the headings of our table. We should make them THs. So I'm just going to find those H's there, just select and then use Command D and hit that a couple times. I believe it's Control D if you're not on a Mac. And then TH will make us a table header. Refresh. All right, so we do get a little bit of different default styles. They are bolded by default, so we can tell what they are. Also, you can see the alignment changed a little bit. This one is now centered. There are obviously multiple ways you could style this using CSS. You can change the alignment. You can space things out. You can add borders. You can add background colors. However, you should only do that via CSS. If you look at the attributes for something like a TH or a TD, there are attributes for background color. Alignment is in here, or align, but they are obsolete. You should not use them. Same thing with background color, axis. There's a bunch of things that you really should not be using, but they're still available to support older websites that use them. So that's THs. That sets up our headers. Let's do one more. Species, the diameter in meters, diameter in feet, and then let's do the name of the tree itself. So most of these trees have a particular name, like Jupiter, the coast redwood. So tree name will be our last header. Tree name right there. Okay, and then I'm going to copy over some of the data, so you won't have to watch that. I'll make another TR and just copy over each little piece of data for the row, make a bunch of TDs, and I'll be back. Okay, so I filled out a couple different rows. Each row has 4 TDs. The species name, the height or the diameter in meters, the diameter in feet, and then the actual name of the tree, like the Sunland, baobab, Jupiter, the coast redwood, General Grant, the giant sequoia. All of these trees look pretty cool if you look up their images. Anyway, it looks like this here. I've got my 4 rows. I've got technically 5 TRs, table rows, but this first one is the headers. It's full of THs, not TDs. Again, you could use TDs everywhere with TRs, including for the headers, but it is just not as meaningful. And you also don't get these default styles, the boldedness, the centering of the headers. However, you can achieve all of that with CSS. You're going to probably completely override all of these styles because it's kind of nasty looking. You can customize everything, but we're not there yet. But most importantly, you should use a TH because this thing is a header. This is a table header cell, and you should be very specific. We have yet to talk a lot about accessibility, about semantic markup, but this is a topic we will revisit. So if it seems like it's kind of useless to use a TH, it is not. And we'll circle back in a separate lecture to talk about all of those topics. Now, while we are talking about using the correct or the most meaningful elements to structure our table, using a TH for a header, using a TD for each individual data cell, there are 3 other elements that we can incorporate. They are called T-head, T-body, and T-foot. Really, it's a table header, the table body, and the table footer. Now, you don't need to use all 3 of them in every single table, but usually you'll end up using the table header, the T-head, and the table body, T-body. So the T-head defines a set of rows defining the head of the columns of the table. Basically, your headers for the table, the column names, it's standard to wrap that row here. It's just a single row in this case. It's standard to wrap that in a T-head element. So it's not going to do a whole lot for us, but we are adding more meaningfulness, more meaning to our markup. We're saying this is the head of the table, or the headers rather. Yes, we only have a single row of headers currently, just one TR, but we can have multiple. For example, what you have right here on the actual Wikipedia table we're copying, we have what looks like 2 different levels or 2 rows going across. Even if it's only right here in this one cell, it looks like we have 2 different rows. And sometimes you will have tables that have multiple rows for the head or the headers. So it's just a good practice to wrap your table row that contains the headers, or table rows with headers, wrap them in the T-head element. I wish it was just called T-header, but it's T-head. And then we do the same thing for the body of our table, the actual content, the data itself. It encapsulates a set of table rows, TRs, indicating that they comprise the body of the table. So again, it's about providing useful information that can be used when rendering for print or screen, or for screen readers for accessibility purposes. We are being very clear about our table. Here is the core data. Here are the columns up top. These are the labels, the header. This isn't actual data. And if you were using a screen reader as an example, and you were unable to see the table, if these were all just TRs and nothing was labeled or nothing was called out specifically as the table head or the table body, your screen reader might start treating this entire row as a piece of data. So it's always best practice to add those in. So we'll add our T body around the actual body of our table, the core data right there. And we'll save. It doesn't look any different at all. It's just a meaningful element to add in. Then we also have a T-foot, which is not as common, but on some tables, you may have a set of rows at the bottom summarizing the columns, totaling things, averaging things, counting, basically something that is separate from the actual rows of the table from each individual row. So if we wanted, I guess we could come up with an average for diameter and meters in diameter and feet. It's not really meaningful in the case of these trees, but we could do it. I will do that math, but before we do that, or before I do the math, we can add in our T-foot, which would go after the table body. So T-foot, and then I would add in a table row, and in that table row, we could have a single cell here, a TD, that would say something like average diameter. Let's see how that looks. And then we would have whatever the average is here and whatever the average is for that second row. So TD again, and I'll just leave them blank for now, and I'll fill out those averages. I'll be right back. Okay, there we go. I did the math very quickly. 10.0 and 32.8 are the respective averages for meters and for feet. And now we have called this out as part of the table footer, a T-foot, to make it clear that it is not a regular old row. It's a summary row. It's the footer of the table. Okay, so that is those three elements there. Next up, we're going to talk about caption very quickly. So the caption element is going to specify the title, the caption, some description of a table. And it's helpful in terms of accessibility. Instead of just having a header or some piece of text above the table, if we embed a caption directly inside the table, which is how it's supposed to work. You should not embed, let's say, an H2 or a paragraph or something directly in a table, but you can embed a caption. Now, this data or this piece of text is forever associated with this table. It's not floating on its own above or below. So it makes it more accessible for people with screen readers, and it's just a way of captioning your table. Now, one important thing that you should know is that the caption element needs to be the very first child of the parent table element. So it should be the very first. It should not just be floating around in the middle of this table or at the end. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. So the very first child of our table means we put a caption right there. And then, let's see, what is this table that we're copying again? List of stoutest living single trunk trees by species. We'll put that in there. We refresh. Yes, it's not very pretty, but our caption is there. Now, you don't always have to have that caption, and you don't always have to have it displaying, but we do want some sort of description as to what this table is. Even if it's generally hidden, we want it to be accessible for people with screen readers, and that's something we'll talk about in a separate lecture. So we're almost done with tables. I know it's not the most engaging, it's not the sexiest topic in HTML, not that there's really any sexy topics in HTML, but still, tables just can't compete with things like video elements or audio elements. But anyway, we've got one more thing that I'd like to cover, which is that on some tables, you'll see the columns, so the headers in this case, actually span multiple rows. So here we have one row, there's the second row, and then if you looked at it the other direction, we have diameter, which is spanning across two columns. Meters and feet go through or across a single column. So there are two attributes that we can use on THs in particular. You can also use them on TDs, called col span and row span. And let me just duplicate this table so we'll have a record of our first version. And then I'll do the same thing down below. And I'll put a little H2 that says second version. Okay, refresh the page. Now the next thing I'd like to do is actually add borders in between each of the elements in here, each cell, each header, so that we can see the relationship as we change some of these headers and we make them multiple columns or multiple rows. It's a lot easier to actually visualize and understand if we have borders. The problem is that the correct way of adding borders these days is through CSS, which of course we have not yet discussed, although it's right around the corner. There is a way of setting borders, a border attribute on a table, but it is not, you're not supposed to use it. It's deprecated. It is out of fashion. So I am going to add in some CSS, but this is purely to help you see what's going on. Okay, so there we go. Don't worry about the specifics. I'm just setting a border on all of these elements, and there we go. We can see what it looks like now. Okay, so not much prettier, but now as I rearrange these headers, you'll be able to see a difference. So what I want to do is add two rows of headers, and I want diameter on one row, like we have here, and then meters and feet down below on their own row. And then each of these, species and tree name, that's all we have in our example, those will be 2 rows tall, so that they're the same height as this, which is 2 rows tall. So we use these two attributes, col span and row span. If we go down to the headers here, I've got my 4 headers. I'm actually going to delete meters and feet and replace this with a single header that says diameter. And then down here, after that table row, I'm going to add another table row with a TH for meters, and then another one, TH, for feet. Now this is probably going to look horrible. Yes, it is not what we want, as you can see, because I haven't used the correct col span and row span attributes. What I need to do is say species is supposed to be 2 rows tall. And I can do that using row span. So if I go to that TH, row span is the name of the attribute. I pass in 2, refresh. Hey, much better. Then we get to, we can decide to do this one first, or let's get tree name working first. Let's say tree name. also has a row span of 2. Okay, now this is totally screwed up. The reason this is happening is that our diameter has the default span of just a single column. It doesn't know it's actually supposed to go all the way across this and this cell, or this column and this column here, and then tree name should be over here. So we have a different attribute, same idea, but it's called call span, and I can tell this diameter table heading that it is supposed to be 2 columns wide. And there we go. We now have meters and feet. They are each 1 column wide. That's the default, so I don't have to set that explicitly. And then we have diameter, which is 2 columns wide. We have species and tree name, which are just 1 column wide. I mean, the actual, if you were to calculate the pixels, the width is wider because the content is wider. We can add in spacing and all of that. You can set the width yourself once we get to CSS. Anyway, they are 1 column wide, but they are 2 rows tall. And if I undid that, if I set row span to 1, that totally messes things up, because now we're saying species just takes up 1 row. Then we've got this th, which would be 1 row, and then tree name is 2 rows vertically. And then meters just finds the next available spot, which would be right here. But if we have species take up 2 rows, then it all goes back to the way we want it to work. So honestly, tables are kind of obnoxious in my opinion. Now they're necessary. This is the way you should display any sort of tabular data. Things like, I mean, we've seen examples already, a pricing table, a comparison table between different tiers of some subscription, what you get on this level, what you get on that level, actual data. If you have tabular data around trees, great use case. They just get a little bit lengthy. The markup can be kind of obnoxious to remember, but they are important to understand. I know today's been a bit dry. I sincerely apologize. Tomorrow we're going to talk about forms. And then we really have just one more day of HTML and then we're done. Next up, it's time for homework. As always, I suggest you do this. I strongly, fiercely, with all my heart suggest that you do this if you want to learn from it. You might feel like you got it from watching me, but trust me, you'll learn a lot more from doing this, especially because this exercise is a slightly trickier table than the one that we've implemented so far. So what I'm asking you to do for this assignment is to recreate this table that you see on your screen right now. There's a screenshot of this table also included in the homework, the directory called homework or today's homework, which you can download with the link in the description. And there's also a starter HTML file. And that starter HTML file looks like this. If you open it in the browser, there's not much. The reason I'm giving you a starter file is that I'm giving you some styles. So we haven't talked about CSS. You do not need to touch that file. If you want to take a look, go ahead. It's always good to look ahead and try and understand what we're going to learn later, but you don't need to touch it. All that you'll need to do is write a table in this file that looks like this. Now, in terms of the actual numbers, I wouldn't spend a long time trying to copy them over. Just put random numbers in there. The things I really care about are the structure, so the headers. Also notice there's some super text in there, some exponents, and then also all of the headers over here. So these are THs as well, and you have to work with call span, you have to work with row span to make this work potentially. So definitely a little bit more involved than the table that we created. I would start with just, this portion here, or even just this portion here, and then add in all of the side stuff, all these headers and little categories. But just to show you the styles here, if I just make a table, and inside of that table I put a tr with, let's do a th, hello, maybe another th, and then let's do another table row, this time with a td, hi, a couple of those. If I refresh the starter file, you'll see you're getting the styles already. So you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is work in this file, the starter.html, and create a table, add table rows. The THs are bolded. They have this light bluish indigo color. So that's how you get all of these. These are THs all over here, and these are all TDs. They just have an alternating background color. So the even ones have a lighter color, the odd ones, I guess, have a lighter color. The even ones have a darker color. That doesn't really matter. So try and implement this. Don't worry about the numbers. Just get the structure in there. play around with column span or call span and row span, and that's the assignment. Download it all in the description. And that's a wrap for today. So thanks for joining. Leave comments, questions, like, subscribe, that sort of thing. And most importantly, please share the course, especially the first video, with any of your friends, family, enemies, coworkers, dogs, cats, anyone, online, in person. Spread the word if you don't mind. I really, really appreciate it. In fact, I appreciate it so much that I have handcrafted a compilation of my cats named Kitty getting stuck to the screen in my bedroom. And here it is. Goodbye, everyone.
There you go.
See you tomorrow.
There you go. Come here. Come here. Let's get that. You're stuck.
Are you stuck again? Get you unstuck. Come on. There you go. Come here.
Ooh, you're stuck fast.
This is like the 5th time today. There you go. Can you not do it again, please? 5 minutes later. Already, huh? Another day. Kitty's stuck again. Oh, Kitty. Are you stuck yet again? Let me see. There you go. Another morning and Kitty is stuck to the window. When are you gonna learn, Kitty? Every day.